The strangest thing about fate is that it never knocks politely. Sometimes it waits until you're standing in a wedding dress with nowhere left to run. The first time I saw Adrian Vale, I was soaked to the bone, barefoot and running from a future that had already been decided for me. But that part came later. The night really began 37 minutes before I was supposed to say, I do. I was standing alone in a private dressing room on the second floor of the Whitmore estate, staring at my reflection in a floor-length mirror that cost more than my car. The white satin gown fit perfectly. Of course it did. Everything about that wedding was perfect. The flowers were perfect. The guest list was perfect. The orchestra outside was perfect. Even the diamond ring on my finger looked perfect beneath the warm chandelier light. The only thing that wasn't perfect was me. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I told myself it was nerves. Any bride would be nervous before walking down the aisle. Any bride would have doubts before marrying a man she'd known for less than a year. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the truth. The truth was much simpler. I didn't love Ethan Whitmore. And worse than that, I didn't trust him. I reached for the glass of water sitting beside the mirror and nearly dropped it when voices drifted through the partially open door connecting my dressing room to the hallway. At first, I ignored them. Wealthy people were everywhere tonight. Politicians, business executives, family friends I'd never met. But then I heard Ethan's voice. My fiancé sounded relaxed, almost amused. I froze. After tonight, she won't be needed anymore. The glass slipped from my fingers. Water splashed across the marble floor. My heart stopped. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe there was another she. Maybe there was some explanation. Then another man laughed softly. You sure she'll never find out? Ethan answered without hesitation. Grace believes whatever she's told. My stomach twisted. The room suddenly felt smaller. The air felt thinner. I couldn't hear the rest clearly, only fragments carried through the door. Contracts, assets, timing, risks. Every word landed like a stone in my chest. I backed away from the doorway, my pulse pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. For months, something had felt wrong. The rushed engagement. The pressure from my father. The way every decision seemed to happen around me instead of with me. Tonight, for the first time, those pieces began fitting together. And I didn't like the picture they created. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. The tall windows rattled from the force of the storm. Rain streaked down the glass in silver rivers. I stared at my reflection again. White dress. Diamond ring. Perfect bride. I looked like someone walking willingly into a trap. Another burst of laughter echoed from the hallway. That was enough. I grabbed the small emergency clutch I'd hidden beneath the vanity table weeks ago. Cash. Driver's license. Phone charger. I hadn't packed it because I planned to run. I'd packed it because some part of me had been afraid. Some part of me had known. My breathing became shallow. Fast. Go, I whispered to myself. Right now. Every second I hesitated felt dangerous. I kicked off my heels and slipped out the service exit behind the dressing suite. The hallway was empty. My heartbeat thundered louder than the storm outside. Somewhere below, the orchestra started playing. Guests applauded. They thought the ceremony was beginning. Instead, the bride was running away. I raced down a narrow staircase used by catering staff and emerged behind the estate near the employee parking lot. Rain immediately drenched my hair and dress. Cold water soaked through the satin and clung to my skin. The wind pushed against me as if trying to force me back. But I kept moving. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I couldn't stay. Behind me, the lights of the mansion glowed against the darkness. Ahead lay miles of rain-soaked roads and uncertainty. I tightened my grip on my emergency bag and disappeared into the storm, completely unaware that before sunrise, I would find myself standing in front of a black door that would change my life forever. Rain erased the world beyond the reach of the streetlights. I had been walking for what felt like hours, though my phone insisted it had only been 43 minutes since I slipped out of the Whitmore estate. My bare feet ached from the wet pavement. The hem of my wedding dress dragged through puddles, collecting dirt and leaves with every step. The emergency clutch tucked beneath my arm felt heavier by the minute. Not because of what was inside it, but because it was the only thing I still controlled. Every other part of my life felt like it belonged to someone else. My father, Ethan. The families who had spent months arranging a future without asking what I wanted. Thunder rolled overhead again. The rain intensified. Cold water ran down my face and neck. I passed rows of expensive homes hidden behind iron gates and stone walls. Everything looked dark. Empty. Untouchable. I checked my phone for the 5th time. No signal. The storm had turned the screen into a reflection of my own frightened expression. Then it buzzed. One message appeared. Ethan, where are you? I stared at the words. A second message arrived almost immediately. Grace, answer me. People are worried. My stomach tightened. Worried was not the right word. I switched the phone off and shoved it back into my clutch. The road curved uphill. My legs felt weaker with every step. I needed shelter. Somewhere dry. Somewhere I could think. Somewhere they would not immediately find me. That was when I saw the house. It sat farther back from the road than the others. Larger. Older. Built from dark stone that seemed almost black beneath the rain. No visible address. No decorative lights. No welcoming front porch. Just a long driveway disappearing into shadows and a single warm light glowing beside a massive front door. Something about the place should have scared me. Instead, it felt like the only option left. I pushed open the front gate. It was unlocked. Gravel crunched beneath my feet as I hurried toward the entrance. By the time I reached the door, I was shivering so hard my teeth nearly chattered. For a moment, I hesitated. Every warning I had ever heard told me not to knock on the door of a stranger in the middle of the night. Then another flash of lightning illuminated the empty road behind me. I raised my hand and knocked. Nothing happened. I knocked again. Harder this time. The sound echoed through the storm. Seconds passed. Then I noticed something above the doorway. A small camera. It rotated slightly, watching me. A quiet click came from somewhere nearby. A speaker hidden in the wall. A man's voice emerged. Calm. Deep. Controlled. Who sent you? The question caught me off guard. I blinked rain from my eyes. No one, I answered honestly. Silence followed. The camera remained fixed on me. Please, I said. I just need help. Another pause. Long enough for doubt to return. Maybe I should leave. Maybe this had been a mistake. Then locks disengaged somewhere inside the door. One after another. Heavy. Mechanical. Deliberate. The door slowly opened. Warm light spilled across the rain-soaked stone. The man standing inside was taller than anyone I had expected. Broad shoulders. Dark hair swept neatly back. White dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. No tie. No visible effort to impress anyone. Yet somehow he commanded the entire doorway simply by standing there. His eyes moved over me once. The soaked wedding dress. The bare feet. The trembling hands clutching a small bag. He did not look surprised. He did not ask questions. He did not offer sympathy. He simply studied me with a level of focus that made me feel seen for the first time all night. My pulse quickened. Every instinct told me this was not an ordinary man. There was something restrained about him, powerful and quiet at the same time, like a storm hidden behind glass. Lightning flashed again behind me. For a second, his face became a silhouette against the warm interior light. Then he stepped aside and opened the door wider. Come inside, he said. And without realizing it, I crossed a threshold that would change everything. The warmth hit me first. Not dramatic. Not comforting. Just unexpected after nearly an hour in cold rain. I stepped across the threshold and immediately became aware of how out of place I looked. Water dripped from my dress onto polished hardwood floors. My hair clung to my shoulders. Mud streaked the bottom of what had once been an expensive wedding gown. The man closed the door behind me. The sound was soft, but something about it felt final. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. I wrapped my arms around myself and looked around. The entrance hall was enormous. Dark wood. Stone walls. Modern artwork illuminated by subtle lighting. No family photographs. No signs of ordinary life. The place felt less like a home and more like a fortress pretending to be one. My host said nothing. He simply watched me with those calm green eyes. Not impatient. Not concerned. Assessing. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Thank you," I said finally. My voice sounded small in the massive room. "I know this is strange." "It is." His answer was immediate. Honest. "Do you always let strangers into your house?" I asked. One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile. No, that answer did not make me feel better. Before I could think of what to say next, footsteps approached from somewhere deeper inside the house. A man appeared from a hallway to my left. He looked to be in his 40s, dressed in a dark suit that fit perfectly. The moment he saw me, surprise flashed across his face. His attention shifted to the wedding dress, then to the man standing beside me. "Sir," he asked carefully, "Miss Miller will be staying here tonight." My breath caught. Miss Miller. I had never told him my name. The suited man showed no reaction. If anything, he looked as though he had expected that answer. "Of course, Mr. Vale," he said. Then he disappeared as quietly as he had arrived. Vale. Adrian Vale. The name settled heavily in my mind. I had heard it before. Somewhere. News articles. Business magazines. Conversations that stopped when certain people entered a room. I could not remember exactly where. Only that the name carried weight. Adrian seemed completely unconcerned by my growing confusion. "You know who I am?" I asked. "I know who you are." His gaze dropped briefly to the diamond ring still on my finger. "Grace Miller." My pulse accelerated. "How? Your photograph has been on social media all week." He sounded almost bored by the question. The Whitmore wedding was difficult to miss. Relief should have followed. Instead, it did not. Something still felt strange. My eyes wandered toward the hallway where the other man had vanished. Another figure stood near the far wall. Then another. Men in dark clothing. Silent. Alert. They were not servants. They were not guests. They noticed me noticing them and immediately looked away. That was somehow worse. I suddenly understood why the camera had been watching the front gate. Why the locks had sounded so heavy. Why every movement inside the house felt controlled. A chill moved through me despite the warmth of the room. This was not simply the home of a wealthy businessman. There were too many eyes. Too much security. Too much silence. Adrian followed my gaze. "You are trying to decide whether you made a mistake coming here." I looked back at him. Did I? For the first time since opening the door, something changed in his expression. Not amusement. Not annoyance. Something closer to honesty. "That depends," he said quietly, "on whether someone is looking for you." The question should have been simple. Instead, images flooded my mind. Ethan's messages. The conversation outside the dressing room. The fear that had driven me into the storm. I swallowed hard. "Yes," I admitted. Adrian held my gaze for several seconds. Then he nodded once. As though I had just confirmed something important. "That is what I thought." Adrian's words lingered in the air long after he stopped speaking. "That is what I thought." The certainty in his voice unsettled me more than if he had asked 100 questions. Most people would have demanded explanations. They would have wanted details, names, reasons. Adrian Vale simply looked at me as though he already understood enough. Somewhere deeper inside the house, a clock chimed midnight. The sound echoed softly through the halls. I suddenly realized that my wedding ceremony had probably started 10 minutes ago. Or maybe it had already fallen apart. Either way, hundreds of people were searching for answers while I stood dripping water onto the floor of a stranger's mansion. Adrian glanced toward a staircase. "You need dry clothes." "I should probably leave," I said. The words came out weaker than I intended. He studied me for a moment. "In this storm, I cannot stay here forever." "Nobody asked you to." Something about that answer caught me off guard. There was no pressure in it. No hidden expectation. Just simple fact. Before I could respond, the man from earlier returned carrying a folded stack of clothing. Sweatpants. A long-sleeved shirt. Thick socks. Ordinary items that somehow felt more comforting than anything I had seen all night. "A guest room has been prepared," he said politely. "Thank you," I replied. His expression softened slightly. My name is Victor. Grace. I know. The answer was gentle, but it reminded me once again that everyone in this house seemed to know more than they should. Victor guided me upstairs. The second floor overlooked the massive entrance hall below. As we walked, I noticed security cameras positioned discreetly along the corridors. Not obvious enough to alarm visitors. Visible enough that they were impossible to miss once you started looking. The guest room was larger than my entire apartment. A fireplace glowed softly in one corner. Fresh towels waited on the bed. Rain tapped against the windows overlooking the dark property outside. If you need anything, someone is always awake, Victor said. Always awake. Another unusual phrase. I thanked him again and closed the door behind me. For the first time since leaving the estate, I was alone. Silence filled the room. Real silence. No orchestra. No wedding planners. No family expectations. Just rain and my own thoughts. I stared at the diamond ring still resting on my finger. It seemed smaller now. Less powerful. Like an object that belonged to someone else's life. Slowly, I twisted it free and placed it on the nightstand. The mark it left on my skin looked strangely pale. My phone vibrated before I could look away. Even though I had switched it off earlier, I must have accidentally powered it back on while walking. Notifications flooded the screen immediately. 37 missed calls. Dozens of messages. My father. My mother. Friends. Unknown numbers. Then Ethan. Where are you? Call me. This is not funny. We need to talk. Another message arrived. Grace, do not make this worse. A chill moved through me, not because of the words themselves, because they sounded less like concern and more like instruction. Then a final message appeared, this time from an unknown number. We know you left. My heartbeat stumbled. The message contained nothing else. No signature. No explanation. Just 6 simple words. I stared at the screen. Outside, lightning flashed across the distant sky. For a brief second, the room brightened. Then darkness returned. Somewhere below, I heard a door open. Voices murmured quietly. Calm. Controlled. Professional. And for reasons I could not explain, I suddenly felt safer inside Adrian Vale's mysterious house than I had felt standing beside my fiancé at my own wedding. Sleep never came. I lay awake staring at the ceiling while rain tapped softly against the windows. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the message again. We know you left. 6 words. Nothing more. Yet they carried enough weight to keep my heart racing long after midnight. Around 3 in the morning, I finally gave up trying to sleep. I slipped out of bed and crossed the room. The house beyond my door remained strangely quiet. Not silent. Quiet. The difference mattered. Somewhere downstairs, people were still awake. Still moving. Still watching. I wrapped the oversized sweater tighter around myself and stepped into the hallway. Soft lights illuminated the corridor. The air smelled faintly of cedar and fresh coffee. As I reached the staircase, voices drifted upward from below. One belonged to Victor. The other belonged to Adrian. Instinct told me to return to my room. Curiosity won. I moved closer until I could see part of the library beneath the balcony railing. Adrian stood near a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the storm. His sleeves were still rolled up. His posture remained perfectly relaxed. Yet everyone around him seemed alert. Focused. Ready. Victor held a tablet in one hand. The Whitmores have contacted half the city, he said. They are calling it a misunderstanding. Adrian looked out at the darkness beyond the glass. Of course they are. They want her found before morning. My stomach tightened. They were talking about me. Victor continued carefully. There are rumors circulating already. There are always rumors. Adrian picked up a coffee cup from a nearby table. The question is whether the rumors are true. Victor hesitated. Do you believe she knows anything? Adrian did not answer immediately. The pause felt deliberate. Calculated. Finally he said, I think she knows more than she realizes. A chill moved through me. Before I could process what that meant, a floorboard creaked beneath my foot. Both men looked up instantly. My breath caught. For a moment nobody spoke. Then Adrian set down his coffee. You should be sleeping. Embarrassment flooded my face. I could not. Clearly. His voice remained calm. Victor excused himself and disappeared through another doorway, leaving Adrian and me alone. I slowly descended the stairs. The library was even larger up close. Shelves lined every wall. Leather-bound books. Historical maps. Framed photographs of cities I did not recognize. Everything felt deliberate. Ordered. Controlled. Much like the man standing in the center of it. I heard my name, I admitted. Adrian nodded once. That tends to happen when people are looking for you. You seem surprisingly informed. Information is useful. That is not an answer. To my surprise, something resembling amusement appeared briefly in his eyes. No, it is not. Rain streaked down the enormous windows behind him. Lightning flashed somewhere far away. I folded my arms. Who exactly are you, Adrian? He studied me for several seconds. Someone your fiancé would prefer you never met. The answer should have sounded dramatic. Instead, he delivered it like a simple fact. That is not reassuring. It was not intended to be. My phone buzzed inside my pocket. Both of us looked down. Another message. Unknown number. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. This time there was only a photograph. My wedding venue. Empty. Dark. Deserted. Beneath it sat a single sentence. Come back before this gets worse. I stared at the screen. Adrian quietly extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, I gave him the phone. His expression did not change while reading the message. Somehow that worried me more than if he had reacted. He handed it back and looked directly into my eyes. Grace, he said calmly, tell me exactly what happened before you ran. For a moment, I considered lying. It would have been easier. Simpler. I barely knew Adrian Vale. Less than a few hours earlier, I had not even known he existed. Yet somehow standing in that library beneath the soft glow of antique lamps, with rain sliding down the massive windows behind him, lying felt impossible. His eyes remained fixed on mine. Patient. Steady. Waiting. I took a slow breath. I heard Ethan talking before the ceremony. Adrian said nothing. There was another man with him. I could not see who it was. My voice sounded distant even to myself. At first I thought they were discussing business. Then Ethan said something. I swallowed hard. He said I would not be needed after tonight. The room became very still. Adrian leaned back slightly against the edge of the desk behind him. And then they started talking about contracts, assets, timing, risks. I shook my head. I do not know exactly what it meant. I only know it felt wrong. Adrian studied me carefully. So you ran. Would you have stayed? The question escaped before I could stop it. To my surprise, he actually considered it. No, he said finally. I would not have. Something about that answer eased a small part of the tension inside my chest. Not much. Just enough to breathe easier. I looked down at my hands. Maybe I overreacted. You do not believe that. No, neither do I. Thunder rumbled somewhere far beyond the estate. The storm was beginning to weaken, but dawn remained hours away. Adrian walked toward one of the bookshelves. From a distance, it looked ordinary. Then he pressed something hidden along the frame. A narrow compartment opened silently. Inside sat several folders and electronic tablets. My pulse quickened. He removed one folder and returned to the desk. Tell me something, Grace. What? Before tonight, how involved were you in Whitmore family business? I almost laughed. Not at all. Not even indirectly? Ethan never discussed business with me. Adrian nodded as if confirming a theory. He opened the folder. Several photographs rested inside. He slid one across the desk toward me. My stomach dropped. It was Ethan, standing beside several men outside a luxury hotel. Nothing unusual at first glance. Yet the expression on Adrian's face told me there was more. What am I looking at? I asked quietly. A man who enjoys controlling information. You investigated him? I investigate everyone who interests me. The answer should have sounded arrogant. Somehow it sounded practical instead. I stared at the photograph. Why would Ethan interest you? Adrian remained silent for a few seconds too long. Then he closed the folder. Because the Whitmores have been making unusual decisions recently. What kind of decisions? The kind that attract attention. That was all he offered. Frustration flickered through me. Every answer seemed wrapped inside another question. Before I could push further, headlights swept briefly across the library windows. Both of us turned toward the glass. A vehicle had entered the front gate. My heartbeat immediately accelerated. Adrian glanced toward his watch. Earlier than expected. Who is it? I asked. He looked back at me. Calm. Completely calm. Someone who believes you should go home. The knot in my stomach tightened instantly, because I already knew exactly who that someone was. My chest tightened as the vehicle rolled to a stop somewhere beyond the front entrance. Even from inside the library, I knew who it was. Ethan. The realization settled over me like cold water. 24 hours earlier, I had imagined spending the rest of my life with him. Now the thought of seeing him made every instinct inside me scream to run. Adrian remained completely still. That calmness should have reassured me. Instead, it only emphasized how nervous I was. Footsteps echoed somewhere beyond the library doors. Not rushed. Controlled. Professional. A moment later, Victor appeared. His expression revealed nothing. Mr. Whitmore is requesting a conversation, he said. Adrian glanced toward the window before returning his attention to me. Requesting, he repeated. Victor nodded once. For now. The words hung in the air. For now. I suddenly understood that whatever world Adrian belonged to operated according to rules I did not fully understand. Rules hidden beneath polite language and measured voices. Adrian looked at me. You do not have to see him. Relief hit me so quickly it was almost embarrassing. Good. For the first time all night, a faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. Honesty is useful. You asked what happened before I ran. I folded my arms tighter across my chest. The truth is I do not know exactly what I overheard. I only know something felt wrong. Adrian studied me carefully. And now? I hesitated. Now I think there is more. Why? I looked toward the dark windows. Because people do not send anonymous messages over a canceled wedding. Silence followed. Adrian seemed to consider that. Finally he nodded. A reasonable conclusion. Victor remained near the doorway. Waiting. Watching. Adrian turned toward him. Tell Mr. Whitmore that Miss Miller is safe. And if he asks to speak with her directly? Adrian's expression never changed. He can ask. Victor inclined his head and left. The door closed softly behind him. I released a breath I had not realized I was holding. He is not going to like that answer. No, Adrian sounded entirely unconcerned. Most people do not enjoy hearing no. You seem accustomed to saying it. This time the smile became slightly more visible. Occupational hazard. Despite everything, I found myself almost smiling back. Almost. Then another thought struck me. Why are you helping me? Adrian looked genuinely surprised by the question. You knocked on my door. That cannot be enough. Why not? I opened my mouth and immediately realized I had no answer. Maybe because I had spent too many years around people who always expected something in return. Maybe because kindness without conditions felt unfamiliar. Adrian walked toward the bookshelf and returned the folder to its hidden compartment. The world is full of transactions, Grace. Exactly. This is not one of them. The certainty in his voice unsettled me in a completely different way. Before I could respond, headlights swept across the far side of the property. Another vehicle. Then another. I moved closer to the window. Beyond the rain-speckled glass, dark silhouettes appeared near the front gate. Security personnel. Staff. Visitors. I could not tell. The estate seemed to wake all at once. Somewhere downstairs a phone rang. A door opened. Quiet conversations drifted through the halls. Adrian joined me at the window. His gaze remained fixed on the activity outside. Calm. Focused. Calculating. What is happening? I asked softly. He watched the gate for another second before answering. Someone finally realized you are not coming back willingly. The moment Adrian finished speaking, the entire estate felt like it shifted. Not physically, but in something deeper, like the air itself had tightened. I stood frozen beside the window, watching the front gate as more vehicles arrived. Black cars lined up one after another, their headlights cutting through the rain like silent warnings. No one outside spoke loudly. No chaos unfolded. Everything remained controlled. That was what made it worse. Order instead of panic. Precision instead of confusion. Adrian stepped away from the window first. "Stay here," he said calmly. The words were not a suggestion. They were a decision already made. I turned toward him immediately. What are they going to do? He did not answer right away. Instead, he looked at me as if measuring how much truth I could handle. They're going to ask questions. About me. About the situation. The distinction should have comforted me. It did not. A faint knock echoed from the lower floor. Then another. Victor's voice could be heard speaking quietly to someone unseen. Adrian adjusted his sleeves with deliberate calm. "You are safe in this house," he said. "That does not change." "Then why does it feel like everything just got worse?" He paused at that. A real pause. Not rehearsed. "Because now the situation has consequences." That single word landed heavily in my chest. Consequences. I had spent the entire night running from a future I did not want. Now it felt like I had run directly into a different version of the same thing. Footsteps moved through the hall below. Multiple people. Controlled movement. Doors opened and closed softly. No shouting. No urgency. Just presence. Adrian walked toward the door of the library. Before leaving, he looked back at me. "Do not come downstairs." "Adrian." My voice came out sharper than I intended. He stopped. I hesitated. If this is about me, I need to know. For the first time since I met him, something shifted in his expression. Not softness. Not reassurance. Something closer to acknowledgement. "You will know," he said quietly. "Just not all at once." Then he left. The door closed behind him. I stood alone in the library, listening to the house breathe around me. Minutes passed. Maybe more. I could hear distant voices, but never clearly enough to understand. My thoughts refused to settle. Ethan's messages kept replaying in my mind. "We know you left. Come back before this gets worse." Each sentence now felt less like concern and more like warning. I moved closer to the window again. The rain had softened slightly, but the driveway outside was now filled with vehicles. I could not see faces clearly, only shapes moving beneath umbrellas and headlights. Somewhere in that gathering, Ethan was there. The realization made my stomach tighten. I had imagined confrontation would feel dramatic, loud, emotional. Instead, it felt structured, controlled, like something carefully arranged long before I ever ran. A soft vibration came from the table behind me. My phone. I picked it up hesitantly. Another message appeared from the unknown number. This time it was longer. "You are not supposed to be there." My breath caught. Before I could react, another line appeared. "Leave while you still can." I stared at the screen, my hands suddenly cold. The library door opened again without warning. Adrian returned. His expression was unchanged, but his eyes carried something heavier now. "They're asking for you," he said. My voice barely worked. "What did you tell them?" "That you are not leaving this house tonight." Outside, the rain began to fall harder again, pressing against the windows like a second presence trying to get inside. The moment Adrian finished speaking, the entire world outside the library felt like it stopped pretending to be normal. I stood still, listening to the rain hammer against the windows while voices moved through the house below like distant echoes from another life. Each sound carried weight now. Each footstep meant intention. I could no longer tell who was in control of the situation, only that I was no longer outside of it. Adrian did not look at the door again. He looked at me. That was worse. "You need to understand something," he said quietly. I swallowed. "Then tell me." For a brief moment, silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable, just heavy. "The people outside are not here for a misunderstanding," he said. "They're here because you are evidence." My breath caught immediately. Evidence of what? Adrian's gaze did not move. "That depends on what you heard that night." I felt my pulse rise in my throat. "I told you I do not know everything." "I believe you," he said. That answer surprised me more than anything else. The library door opened again. Victor stepped inside, his expression controlled, but sharper than before. "They are requesting entry," he said. Adrian did not react immediately. Instead, he walked toward the center of the room, as if considering the structure of the entire house rather than the people inside it. "How many?" he asked. "4 vehicles. Possibly 6 individuals. No weapons visible." Victor paused slightly. "But that does not mean unarmed." Adrian nodded once, as if confirming a calculation. Then he turned to me. "Grace, come here." My feet moved before I fully understood why. When I reached him, he gestured toward a small hallway behind the bookshelves. "If I tell you to go, you go without hesitation." "Adrian, what is going on?" His voice lowered slightly. "You ran from a man who controls narratives. That is dangerous. But misunderstanding power structures is worse." I did not fully understand what he meant, but I understood the seriousness behind it. Another knock echoed through the house, closer now. Victor looked toward Adrian. "They're at the main doors." Adrian exhaled slowly. "Let them in." My heart dropped. "What?" He looked at me again, and for the first time since I met him, his expression softened slightly. Not in emotion, but in clarity. "Because running only works when you are unseen," he said. "And you are no longer unseen." Footsteps approached the library. Multiple people. Controlled and deliberate. The door opened. Ethan Whitmore stepped inside. He was not wet from the rain. Not rushed. Perfectly composed in a dark suit, as if the storm outside had never touched him. His eyes immediately found me. "Grace," he said calmly. My body stiffened instinctively. Behind him stood 2 men I did not recognize. Professional posture. Quiet presence. Nothing theatrical. Just presence that made the room feel smaller. Ethan's gaze shifted briefly to Adrian. Then back to me. "You left in the middle of a very important evening," he said. Adrian did not move. "She left because she chose to," he replied evenly. Ethan's expression remained controlled, but something behind his eyes sharpened. "This does not involve you." "It does now." The room went silent. Ethan took 1 step forward. "Grace, come here. We can fix this." His voice softened slightly, like a practiced performance. I did not move. My voice came out quieter than I expected. "Fix what?" Ethan paused. Just for a second. That pause said more than his words ever could. Adrian spoke before Ethan could respond. "You should leave." Ethan finally looked directly at him. "You do not understand what you are interfering with." Adrian's tone remained steady. "I understand more than you think." The tension between them filled the room, but nothing escalated. No raised voices. No sudden movements. Only control layered over control. I looked at Ethan, searching for something familiar. Something safe. I did not find it. Instead, I remembered the words I had overheard. Not needed. Timing. Risks. I stepped back slightly without realizing it. Ethan noticed. His expression changed almost imperceptibly. "Grace," he said again, more firmly this time. Adrian moved closer to me, not touching, just positioning himself between us in a way that was subtle but unmistakable. "She is not your responsibility anymore," he said. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what she is involved in." Adrian nodded slightly. "That is where you are wrong." A long silence followed. Then Ethan looked at me one last time. Not pleading. Not angry. Calculating. "This is not finished," he said quietly. Then he turned and left. The men behind him followed. The door closed. The house did not relax immediately. It remained still, as if waiting for confirmation that the moment had truly passed. I felt my legs weaken slightly. Adrian finally exhaled slowly. "It is done for now," he said. I looked at him. "For now." He met my gaze. "Now you get to decide what kind of truth you want to live with." Outside, the rain began to fade into a distant sound. Not gone. Just less powerful. For the first time since I ran from the wedding, I was no longer running at all.